The Carolina Hurricanes have finally inked Sebastian Aho to a long-term extension. We will talk about that and more in this episode of Locked On Hurricanes.
Your Locked On Hurricanes, your daily podcast on the Carolina Hurricanes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hey there, Caniacs. I'm your host, Jared Ellis, and you're listening to Locked On Hurricanes on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And as always, I am joined by my co-host, Andrew Schnittker. How are you doing on this Tuesday afternoon, Andrew? Are you having a Baja Blast? They are back in stores now.
Yeah, I am having a Baja Blast, not as much of a Baja Blast as Sebastian Aho, and I am sure his agent, Jerry Johansson, are having today, though, with that new 8-year contract extension locked in. I do love me some Baja Blast, though. I have tried a couple of the Baja Blast spinoffs that they've put out. Not quite as good as the originals, but some good flavors. I will always try a new Mountain Dew flavor, except for the spicy one. I don't do spicy drinks, but other than that, yeah, love me some Baja Blasts.
Yeah, the flaming hot Mountain Dew was odd, to say the least. But yeah, this is big stuff. We have been talking about this a lot this offseason of when it could be happening, what it'd be looking like. And yeah, we pretty much hit it on the head with a lot of our predictions for this. We knew it was going to be coming. They said that was a big goal for this offseason to go ahead and get him extended, and they did. They have him locked in through the 2031-32 season. Good Lord, we're getting old. Time is flying. Sebastian Aho will be in his mid-30s when this is up, so that's crazy. And this contract obviously kicks in at the beginning of the 24-25 season. $78 million contract extension, $9.75 million AAV. And one thing I was looking at right before we started recording is I believe this is the biggest contract in Hurricanes history. I know when Svetch signed his extension a couple years ago, at the time his was, and I think this one is now the biggest contract in franchise history, and well deserved.
Yeah, I don't know if it's the biggest in terms of total value. I don't know if maybe this, like Eric Stahl's second contract might have been that. But in terms of the highest AAV, it most certainly is. I don't know about total value, but it's definitely highest AAV. Not close, I don't think.
Yeah, and yeah, like I said, this is extremely well deserved. Don Waddell said in the press release that, quote, Sebastian has developed into one of the best two-way centers in hockey. He's a tremendous leader on and off the ice who sets a great example for our younger players. We're grateful that he's decided to stay in Carolina for the foreseeable future, end quote. And yeah, we knew this was going to happen. When we were talking about our predictions for this contract, we were both, yeah, it's going to be 8 years. We honestly may have overestimated on salary. I know we were thinking kind of in the 10 million range, and now it's at just under that at 9.75, because we know he easily could have gotten 10 or more, and maybe took a little bit of a discount to stay here. And yeah, I'm loving this. I really am. The fact that we don't have to worry about this for the next 9 years, considering he still has 1 year left on the one he's on. Nearly a decade of not having to worry about Sebastian Aho going anywhere.
Yeah, I think this is a great, for so many reasons for the Hurricanes. I think it's at least a little bit of a bargain on the AAV, because I think I'm with you that Aho certainly could have gotten 10. I mean, you look at his numbers, he's a perennial 30, 40 goal, 70 to 80 point guy. He's a true number one center. he's their guy.
Mm-hmm.
He is the guy for the Hurricanes. He's probably the future captain. I know that's
Yep.
been talked about a lot whenever Jordan Stahl hangs them up, or if they do like a transition plan type thing at some point. But this is why, to me, what happened the first time with the offer sheet was never a concern. You
Mm-hmm.
heard from everybody that was water under the bridge. Everybody got what they wanted out of that deal. Aho got paid. The Hurricanes got him locked in for 5 years at a very reasonable rate, honestly. And I just got the feeling, that with how valued he was, that this time was going to be different. They were going to, put value on just getting it done, because the last time he was an RFA, the Hurricanes had all the leverage, because you always have leverage as a team if you're dealing with an RFA, because worst case, they sign an offer sheet and you can match it. I said and thought that this negotiation would be a lot different, and lo and behold, it was. They just sat down, hammered it out, got it done, and now, this isn't a concern. And now you kind of have that setup of, okay, here's our guy, here's our franchise center, here's what he's making for the next 9 years. You've got Andrei Svechnikov locked in long-term as well. You can really get started now in terms of building the future, team around them. Okay, here's what we might do with other guys, signing them to extensions, or here's what, guys we might bring in and what contracts they might have to get. Now that you have this number for Aho locked in, I think it gives you that freedom now to really start exploring some of the other things that you can do long term.
Yeah, I really think so. Again, Sebastian Aho, as we're talking about today, you just mentioned Andrei Svechnikov. Spirit Kotkaniemi, another guy that's locked in long term, and not long term, but Pyotr Kochetkov. He's another guy. Outside of the next 2 years, he's one of the guys that has the most term on their deals right now, which is crazy to think about with the way the Hurricanes have done their contracts. But they definitely seem to be locking in their long-term future here with God, my brain just turned to mush there, guys. Just blown that Sebastian Aho got such a good birthday present from the Hurricanes. And there's definitely going to be expectations put on Sebastian now. Same with how there were on Andre whenever he signed his. Same on Jesperi when he signed his extension. That's going to be the same for Aho. And those expectations are probably going to be a bit higher than those other two guys. And we will dive into those expectations for Sebastian Aho on his new deal going through the next 9 years. We'll talk about those right after this quick break, folks. Now, folks, the Carolina Hurricanes took care of Sebastian Aho this season, and it's time for you to take care of yourself. And you can do that with our next partner, Athletic Greens. If you've been around the show for a while, I know you've heard us talk about AG1. And if you're new here, we're going to tell you about it. Again, AG1 is a foundational nutrition supplement that delivers comprehensive nutrients to support whole body health. AG1 replaces your multivitamin, probiotic, and more in just one simple drinkable habit, science-driven formula of vitamins, probiotics, and whole food source nutrients. AG1 is raising the standard for quality in the supplement category. AG1 helps you build your health and foundation first. Because, folks, you can't be in a good spot if your foundation isn't good, and AG1 is going to help you do that. Just like the Hurricanes are setting their foundation up well with Sebastian Aho, getting him on that long-term deal. And if a comprehensive solution is what you need from your supplement routine, then try AG1 and get a free 1-year supply of vitamin D and 5 free AG1 travel packs with your first purchase. Go to drinkag1.com/NHL network. That's drinkag1.com/NHL network. Check it out, folks. You won't regret it. Now, diving back into Sebastian Aho's contract. Again, he is locked in through the 2031-2032 season. Going to be a long time. And like I said at top episode, this is going to take him through his mid 30s. He'll be 34, 35 at the end of this particular deal, which is crazy to think about. We'll be in our 30s. We'll be approaching our late 30s at that point. Jeez. But
Don't talk about that. No more of that.
yeah, I know. And with this again is going to come expectations. I remember I talked about this a lot with Svetch whenever he signed his a couple years ago, and talking about how I wanted to see him progress. At the time, not take as many penalties because that was an issue coming off of that season prior, of how it was like anytime he was on the ice, he'd be getting called for some kind of penalty, and that has been something that has gotten under control, as well as him continue to grow offensively. Now with Sebastian Aho, as you said already, he's a consistent guy for 30, 40 goals, 70, 80 points. So he's already there in that regard. Yeah, I'd like to see him, continue to grow and get better offensively, even though he's already really stinking good as is. So that's not necessarily like it's one of those things like, oh, that's an area he can improve. Every player can improve in that regard. Maybe with the exception like Connor McDavid or something like that. Kind of feel like he's already maxed out there. But yeah, I'd like to see him continue to grow offensively. A lot of this is really good for him. For me, at least, with expectations for him, is going to be consistency. Not saying he's inconsistent, but in the past we've seen where it takes him a little bit to heat up in the season. It's usually not until like late November, December, that he really gets going in terms of offensive production. This past season was a bit different, but there is that history there, as well as maybe avoiding some of the lulls that you see in seasons. Again, that's something that's going to happen for every player, regardless. But it is one of those things. Now you are, like you said, Andrew, he's the guy here. I definitely like to see him, that not be as big of an issue as it has been in the past.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me, and in terms of, like you said, maybe boosting that production a little bit. He hasn't actually hit 40 goals yet. He would
Yeah, I
have
know
in
he's
the
been close.
He will, and I mean, really, it's kind of unfair to say he hasn't, because he was too shy when the regular season got paused for COVID in 2020. So he almost certainly would have hit it that season.
Mm-hmm.
And even these past couple seasons, he's hit like 37, 36 while missing a handful of games. But, I think, we talked about it. He's the guy. You heard Tom Dundon say it early in the offseason, I believe, it was either on the Ovius and Giglio podcast or in his interview with Luke DeCock. I can't remember which one it was, but you heard him say, this is his team now. So what I want to see from Sebastian Aho is keep stepping up and taking on even more and more of that vocal leadership role, because I truly do believe that the Hurricanes look at him as that future captain. So,
Mm-hmm.
keep stepping up, make it your team, be a leader, in the playoffs. Now, some of this stuff about Aho in the playoffs is very overblown. He's been overall very good in the playoffs,
Yeah.
but, really step up and take charge and drag the team that extra mile. The other expectation I have, and I'll get into in a couple minutes here, how well the Hurricanes are set up with some of these contracts that they have locked in now. But the other one, you look at the Hurricanes leaderboard. Sebastian Aho is currently third in the regular season in points with 468. Eric Stahl is first with 775. He's third in goals as well with second in goals with 218. Eric Stahl is first with 322. So I would expect over the life of, by the time this 8-year extension ends, Sebastian Aho is very likely going to be the Hurricanes' all-time team leader. I haven't looked at franchise. I'm just including Carolina here. but I mean, I don't know. He might be able to catch Ron Francis as well. But all-time team leader for the Hurricanes chapter, at least in most major offensive categories. And I think that's a really
Yeah.
cool thing to know that, that this current chapter of Hurricanes history is going to keep taking on such a larger and larger, more prominent role in the overall team history, as it
Mhm.
should, because other than, obviously they haven't won a Stanley Cup yet, but this is the biggest run of sustained success in Hurricanes history. And Sebastian Aho's been front and center in all of that. And now with locking him in for those 8 years, you've taken a huge step to ensuring that continues into the future.
Yeah, 100%. That was something I was gonna mention as well because he already has a bunch of records for the Hurricanes, but like you said, by the time, these next 9 years have passed, he's probably gonna have most of them. Uh, he's gonna have most of those records, and, I agree with you. I do think that with locking him in for as long as they did, I agree. I think they kinda have him pegged for the next captain of the team whenever Jordan Stahl decides to hang it up, which you figure would probably be at the end of the deal he's on now. So, yeah, I definitely think that's a very, very strong possibility. He already has, the A on his jersey. As Don Waddell said, he's great leader on and off the ice. And I agree with you. I definitely want to see him to continue to develop that way, be more vocal, hold more guys accountable. Like you said in the playoffs, really put the team on his back. And get them, that goal that they need or whatever it may be. And that was something that I also said for Andre as well is, when he signed his extension expectations I had for him, it was developing as a leader on the team. And we have seen that some as well. And I definitely think, Sebastian, he knows what he has to do. We see how competitive he is. We're going to hear from him and Dom Waddell later on today in their press conference talking about the extension. So we'll get more. We'll get Sebastian's goals from him a little bit later on today. We'll talk about that later tonight after everything is said and done. We can sit down and go through it. But yeah, I'm really, really excited that this deal has finally gotten done. And when all is said and done, it's very, very strong possibility. Along with all those records, he has his number 20 up in the rafters as well, because he is, like you said, just been front and center for all of this.
Yeah, and you look too now at, like I said, Aho's going to be on a very reasonable deal going forward. Andrei Svechnikov is. You look at how the way the Hurricanes have set themselves up into the future. I mean, you look at Sebastian Aho, Andrei Svechnikov, Jesperi Kotkaniemi. Now, I'm not calling Kotkaniemi a core player, but
Mhm.
those three guys are locked in through 2029 at a little under 23 million combined AAV. That's your best winger, your number one center, and either your number two or number three center, depending on what else you do, who else comes in that time. That's a great place to be starting out with, especially as we expect the cap to keep going up.
Mhm.
But you guys have heard me say on here before that I think the Hurricanes have three foundational core players that you pay them what you need to pay them, no questions asked, to keep them here long term. They've already done two of them to very reasonable team friendly deals in Sebastian Aho and Andrei Svechnikov. Next up is going to be next summer when Jacob Slavin is due for an extension. He's another guy that I think you give an 8-year deal and a blank check to. So, as
Mhm.
I said, they got 2 out of 3 done. Very, very good start on really locking in the foundation for the future. Now it's about, figuring out who else you're going to lock in for the future, kind of what that core group is going to be, and putting pieces around them to start to try to win the Stanley Cup. Because I think you sign a deal like this, you have a player like this, that's got to be the other expectation, that Sebastian
Mhm.
Aho raises the Stanley Cup in a Hurricanes uniform. Um, I don't want to say at least once, because it's so hard to win the cup even
Yeah.
once. But definitely at least once in his hurt. So I said it. I said I didn't want to say it, but I said it. But
Yeah,
you
I
know
know
what
what
I
you mean.
mean. As a Hurricane, I'm not like trying to put any like, oh, I want to see like 4 cups in 8 years, because like that's ridiculously hard. I mean, like,
Yeah, yeah,
so I mean,
that would
even
be an
Tampa. What did
unrealistic expectation.
Yeah, exactly. It would. So, but no, I mean, to see the Hurricane, I think the one of the expectations has to be seeing the Hurricanes winning a Stanley Cup in Sebastian Aho's prime.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely think the way they're setting things up, like you said, with Aho, with Sveshnikov, next summer with Slavin, and then we'll throw Kokaniemi in there as well. Again, I don't necessarily think he's a core piece, but yeah, he's
He's
at
a
least
he's a good
long
player.
term their number 2 center. Maybe not this
Yeah, I mean,
season, but we'll see. But yeah, I
he's a
definitely
good guy
think
to have around for sure.
I definitely think that we we definitely have expectations for this team now. Very high expectations. And you know before we move on, Andrew, are there any other things that you have to any other expectations, any other thoughts that you have on this Aho deal?
Not at the moment. We've covered the money, the long term and short term aspects of it pretty
Hmm.
well. I think we'll get more into different stuff after we hear from him and Dom
Yeah.
Waddell this afternoon. And I know we do have another item on the agenda that I have yet to weigh in on, so we can move forward here.
Yeah, and that was one I talked about yesterday because as you said, with the team adding pieces around these core guys, they did that yesterday with bringing back Tony DeAngelo on a 1-year, $1.675 million contract, and I gave my thoughts on that yesterday. But we still need to get Andrew's thoughts on that deal. Things he didn't like about it, things he may like about it. We'll get into all of that right after this quick break, folks. All right, folks, we are back, and it is time for Andrew to give his thoughts on the Carolina Hurricanes bringing back Tony DeAngelo. This was, again, as I said yesterday, a deal that we knew would happen, but it was weird that it took so long. Again, that trade with Philly was agreed on in principle, but then the day came for them to be able to do it. It didn't get done. Time kept going by, kept going by, kept going by. Philly just ended up releasing him altogether. And then again, time just kept going by and going by. The Hurricanes didn't sign him, and nobody else did either. But eventually it has gotten done. He's back on a 1-year, 1.675 million contract. Andrew, what are your thoughts on this deal?
Yeah, I mean, I've been through my thoughts as a whole on this, all the way back to when it was first rumored that they were going to trade for him. They do get him at more of a discount now than the 2.5 million.
Yeah.
This is quibbling a little bit. It's not a huge deal, but just for a guy who's just been bought out, his old, things weren't going well. This is clearly the place he wants to be. Cap space is at a premium. I wouldn't have gone over a million. Again,
Yeah.
600 or 1,000 or so, not really a ton to quibble with there, but it does all add up. I mean,
Mhm.
we've talked about it. The upsides and the downsides here are clear. He's coming off a year in Philly where he was benched down the stretch. I mean, he had a pretty good year offensively. He had 11 goals, 42 points in 70 games. He did have a horrendous year defensively. He was a minus 27. There were games down the stretch where John Tortorella would rather play with 5 defensemen than play him. Now,
Yeah.
none, he was not there. He fit in well here. I think, he fit in well with Rod Brind'amour. He fit in well with the leaders on the team. He just did what was asked of him. And so I think the Hurricanes' expectation is that's going to happen again. And there's evidence for that. Everything was fine when he was here. There were no off ice issues with teammates or anything else. So I think the Hurricanes are right in betting on that. His offensive skills are undeniable. I mean, he had 10 goals and 51 points for the Hurricanes the year he was here. Even last year, what was considered a bad year for him, he had 11 goals, 42 points. He's terrible defensively. I'm not going to sugarcoat that. He is one of the worst defensemen in the entire NHL at actually defending. Playing with Jacob Slavin when he was here the first time, was able to cover for those weaknesses. He is more than likely not going to be playing with Slavin again because Jacob Slavin plays with Brent Burns now. With the addition of Dmitry Orlov, I think the Hurricanes have more options for giving him a strong partner because, like we've said, we expect, especially now that they've got kind of a logjam on the right side with Burns, Chatfield, DeAngelo, and Pesce. I think this makes it even more likely that Brett Pesce is going to get dealt, especially if the Hurricanes aren't going to extend him long term. We know their preference is to either extend or trade him. So you are looking now at, it wouldn't be Jalen Chatfield playing on his offside with DeAngelo. DeAngelo would be playing next to either Dmitry Orlov or Brady Shea, neither of whom are Slavin, but I think both are better suited to cover for some of his defensive lapses than Chatfield, although Brady Shea does have his scary moments defensively. So the Shea DeAngelo pairing could be a little bit of a scary ride, but if that's your third pairing, if Orlov plays with Chatfield, then if Pesce stays, then it sucks, but Jalen Chatfield would probably be the odd man out, and then maybe Orlov and Pesce play together, and then you could really shelter Shea and DeAngelo. So no, look, there's obvious upside and there's obvious downside. The downside obviously being his defensive deficiencies, and if the Hurricanes can find a way to cover for those enough again without him playing with Slavin. The upside being he's a great offensive defenseman, very good at carrying the puck up the ice, roving in the offensive zone, making things happen. He can run the power play very well. That's your power play 2 quarterback. I do wonder if this kind of signals that the Hurricanes are backing off on Erik Karlsson. Maybe they just feel like they can't find a way to make that work. But, like we've said, that would be a very, very complicated trade to pull off. So maybe they can't. And this is their fallback, which again, Tony DeAngelo, good power play quarterback. So again, I think there's, there's upside and downside here. The downside being his defensive woes. Can they make that work within their system and structure again without putting human eraser Jacob Slavin next to him? And then, if his defensive lapses are coming through more often, does the offensive production he can provide and his ability to quarterback power play 2 outweigh that? It could. We'll see. So I said, not a move that I personally would have made just because of what, the fact that he's being bought out by yet another team, the fact of his defensive deficiencies, but a move that I can certainly understand why the Hurricanes made it.
Yeah, I can understand it as well. And, you mentioned Erik Karlsson. That was something I mentioned yesterday of now that they have brought him back, does this mean they're out on Karlsson? Was this their backup plan? Because now you have yet another defenseman on your roster. And as things stand right now, DeAngelo, could be the odd guy out, or it could be Chatfield. Like, who knows? But I do feel like moves are going to happen for sure. It's just gonna be what those moves are, really. Because again, there is that logjam on the right side. Is someone getting dealt? One thing I also mentioned is, Chatfield is the guy on the 2-way deal. They could easily send him down to the AHL. He's too good for that. I think he proved that last year with how he forced their hand to keep him in the NHL. The only time he missed games was when he was hurt.
And I actually don't think they can do that because I think if I remember correctly, when he signed that deal, it was 2-way in the first year and it's 1-way next year. So I don't think they could. They'd have to put him on waivers and he'd get claimed.
He would be claimed for sure.
Quick. So
yeah,
no, I actually don't think the AHL is an option for him.
Yeah, I don't either. I thought it was 2-way for both years, but even,
He's an NHL player.
yeah, he's an NHL player. And one thing I did talk about yesterday was the fact that, obviously, now, I know he can't be sent back down, because he's on the one way aside from waivers. But, with their AHL situation, that would just be a nightmare for him, going, to wherever, at least in Chicago. He knew, how things went there. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens here with the defenseman group, with the logjam that is there now. But as we always say, these are things, you can't rush. They're ones that you just got to let the days go by. And whenever, it happens, it happens. Whenever these moves happen, again, whether it's Brett Pesce getting extended, getting traded, Brady Shea getting extended or getting traded, whatever, you know, they just happen when they're going to happen. And we'll obviously talk about all of those moves here on Locked On Hurricanes whenever they happen. So make sure you're following along on Twitter at LO_Hurricanes, myself at Jared Ellis _96, and Andrew on Twitter at ASchnit53. We are still going to call it Twitter because we have done that for a long time. So we're going to keep calling it Twitter.
I'm not calling it the other thing.
Yeah, I'm not either.
Spoiler alert, you will not hear that out of my mouth on this show.
Yeah. Go follow us, folks. Enjoy the rest of your day. And we will be back when we talk about the takeaways from the Don Waddell Sebastian Aho press conference later on today. And as always, folks, let's go Canes.